This is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.
Body Bags with Joseph Scott Morgan. I love word origins, and one of the things I found out about my surname, Morgan, is that it derives from, some people say, a Welsh word that actually means water sprite, or one, it can be translated to one that dwells by the sea. But the term sprite always was interesting to me because I didn't really know what a sprite was. And apparently a sprite is like a fairy, is what it is. It's a mythological creature, right? Well, today we're going to talk about another type of fairy, a bit more notorious fairy. A fairy that many people have referred to over the years as the green fairy. I'm going to talk about a case that befuddled many people for a number of weeks. They couldn't really figure it out, but it's something I wanted to discuss for some time. It involves a beautiful wife, her veteran Army husband, and the green fairy of absinthe. I'm Joseph Scott Morgan, and this is Body Bags. Dave, I don't think I want to visit from the green fairy. I got to tell you, I was telling you this before the show. Actually, we were talking about things yesterday, and I'd mentioned to you that in New Orleans, literally right on Bourbon Street, there is a bar, and this bar, like some things come and go in the French Quarter, all right? But there's certain places in the French Quarter that you know that they're there, they've always been there, and they're not going anywhere. There's a couple of places like that. Lafitte's Blacksmith Shop is amazing, because Jean Lafitte actually went in this place to plan his piracy and all this stuff. But there's another place there that's called the Old Absinthe Bar, and it's, ever since my childhood, I remember that place being there, and it goes back years and years and years, and a lot of it has to do with the French culture and the European culture. They specialize in a particular drink that is made from absinthe, and if for those of you that don't know about absinthe, it has a very unique history. Kind of a notorious history, actually, going back many, many years, to the point where many people in Europe and in America viewed it as something that the law should regulate. Can you imagine that? And it's rooted in an event, if I remember correctly, involving a Swiss farmer who allegedly drank absinthe and then went about murdering his entire family. And that was kind of ground zero for them beginning to outlaw this liquor in a variety of locations throughout Europe and eventually. And of course, all of this happened in the middle of the abolition movement relative to alcohol. Mm-hmm. So many times you don't know what's truth and what isn't,
right?
And they can take something and kind of twist it around for their own. We've never heard politicians do that, right? So you never know.
Well, the reason we're even talking about it, the little green fairy or whatever it is, absinthe, is because of an event that took place in Alabama, in Calera, Alabama. Jeff West and his wife, Kat West, had date night. And when date night was over, Kat West's nude body, was found, I guess she had a bra on, but was found in front of their house early in the morning, found by a young girl who was on her way to her fast food restaurant to work her early shift and sees the beautiful Cat West laid out, obviously not moving, but she was dead. So date night, dinner, drinks, mom and dad have our daughter, and then within 12 hours, Cat West is dead. For me, Joe, I had a radio partner in Birmingham, Alabama in the late 90s doing a country morning show, and it was the Cat and Mack show. My partner was Cat West. Not the Cat West we're talking about. But if you can imagine, because Calera is just south of Birmingham, Alabama. It's a commuter city for a lot of folks, and there were conservatively thousands that reached out when this happened in the area. Is that your cat? And I said, no, this is a different one. But it was two things. One, people were deeply concerned about how a woman could end up after date night dead, naked in front of her house. And the other was my old radio partner. I thought, where were y'all when we needed ratings? But anyway, the story of absinthe was brought into this because Cat West's body was found in front of her house. She's dead. Her cell phone is cracked in there, and laying on top of it, standing on top of it, is a bottle of absinthe. Those are your clues. Yep. Dead woman, bottle of absinthe on top of a cracked phone.
I got to tell you
what happened.
From my perspective as a death investigator, this is not the only time where I have encountered a story. Actually, I worked a case involving the placement of a wine bottle. And you go out on these scenes many times, in particular where there's total chaos, and you can go into a home where there's a lot of drinking going on. And I've walked in, and you've got all kinds of empty alcohol containers lying about, and that doesn't go to what I think probably people that are in the profiling business would say an organized mindset. It's very disorganized. You walk into an environment, it's very chaotic. I actually had a guy that drank 3, if you can imagine this, he was chronic alcoholic, but he drank 3 bottles of red wine, wrote a note and placed the note on top of the bottles that were upright, and then had a gigantic wine glass that he sat on top of the note, which was underpinned by these bottles. Now, can you imagine having to do that, being that drunk? But his tolerance was so high, and then he proceeded to take his life. And those bottles that bottle meant something. Those bottles, that collection meant something. Mm-hmm. It was like an indication that he had determined that he was going to take his life in this case, and he was able to ingest this wine. His blood alcohol was through the roof, as you can imagine, but he was still functional. And you have his
blood sugar had to have been trashed.
Man. Yeah, with that
3
much
bottles
wine,
of red wine,
on that level. And
wow,
yeah, you're absolutely right. And interestingly enough, this handwritten note that he left behind had beautiful clarity. His handwriting was impeccable, which to me, even if I had half a bottle of wine, I'd be passed out on the floor asleep, snoring heavily. So yeah, what does it mean, when you go out to a scene and you see objects tell you a lot at a scene. You begin to think about objects that are placed in a particular way. So what can we ascertain from, where you have a cell phone and then you have a bottle that is positioned on top of it like it has been put there, and then you've got arguably this very attractive woman who is
Hey, by the way, let me clarify why we say that.
Yeah, sure.
The reason we say is she was an online model. She had an online presence. She had an online business that dealt with her in various stages of undress pictures that her husband took oftentimes. And I don't want to go overboard saying she's beautiful, but she was a beautiful woman. And that's, I think, one of the things that we tend to look at when we say beautiful because physically she was a beautiful woman, and she had the pictures to prove it. And that actually is why there was so much to this
Oh my
story.
gosh, yeah.
That because was it one of the guys online, but we'll get into that in a minute. I just wanted to clarify. It's not like you and I just saw a picture of her and went, wow, this has been a part of this story since the very beginning. And to be honest with you, even her friends, people who knew both Kat and Jeff West, were amazed because they were kind of a Mutt and Jeff couple. Jeff West, not a whole lot to look at. And they're like, I think one of her friends actually said, how did that guy get this?
Right.
And
yeah.
it was the opposites attract thing, that she was loud and beautiful and all that, but apparently just an incredibly nice, wonderful woman people really loved, including her husband, Jeff West.
Yeah, and they had a child as well. And
Lola.
and that's one of the things relative to this particular night. They had set up a date night, which my wife and I did when our kids were young. If you could find somebody to watch your child,
and that was their regular date night.
Yeah.
Their daughter was 12 at the time, and they did.
And it's a treat, to be able to go out with, and you kind of, it's like a date. You feel young again. You're free from all of these responsibilities at home, and all these sorts of things. And just for a moment, you can kind of escape. But the one thing that Kat could not escape was the fact that by the next morning, after their date night, she was dead. Alsace-Lorraine. It's an area that is, in Switzerland, and this is the way I understand it, is that you've kind of got, and please forgive me to all of our Swiss listeners. I don't mean to insult you, but this is my limited understanding. The eastern portion of Switzerland is more German, and then the western portion of Switzerland leans more French. Obviously, it shares a border with France. There's an area over there called Alsace-Lorraine. And the reason that's important geographically is that that's where a plant grows that's referred to, and this kind of makes my skin crawl when I hear about it, is wormwood. And it is from wormwood traditionally that absinthe is produced. And when it's in its purest form, when it was first discovered by, I think, a Swiss physician, and he was using it to cure things like gout and this sort of thing, to give people relief. But they also realized, because the naturally occurring high alcohol content after distillation, that they could use it as an antiseptic. So it had multiple uses, and you go back years and years and think about, people that they relied on nature to provide all of their pharmaceuticals back then. They were looking for substances, and boy, did they find one. And this because in its purest form, the alcohol that is made, that is consumed, absinthe that is consumed by folks, it had very strong hallucinogenic effects. So you could have, and people would get roaring drunk off of this stuff. And then it also had this component where you would hallucinate when you drank it. And I think it really scared people. And it didn't help. It didn't help either that there were people that wasn't enough for them. There were people that would begin to put drops of opium in this drink. So it really kicked it up to another level.
Didn't you tell me that's what Ernest Hemingway did?
Well, yeah, there were a lot of these famous writers, that there were a couple of drinks. I know absinthe, and then there's another drink called Pernod, which is, it kind of tastes like, I've actually tasted absinthe before. And it's got and I don't find the taste pleasant. To me, it's got kind of a black licorice taste to it, which is not something that's pleasant. I mean, a lot of people love it. My grandparents thought that black licorice was like the greatest thing in the world, but they like molasses too. So when you've got limited means, there's certain things that taste wonderful, I guess. But for me, it's just not. It wouldn't be, no pun intended, my cup of tea. But but and the reason we're talking about this is that night. There is CCTV of Kat and Jeff West walking into a liquor store there in the greater metropolitan area of Birmingham, Alabama, and they're there to purchase a bottle of absinthe, Dave.
And this date night where they went to dinner and had drinks while I think it was Kat West's mom and dad watched their daughter Lola. They were in a good mood. They were on their way home and stopped at the liquor store, bought the bottle of absinthe. And we know this because we saw the security camera footage. It was a big deal when that was released because not you, but in general, it looked like they were a couple enamored with one another. They were having a good time. There was no tension. They were actually physically, demonstrating their relationship.
He playfully, and yes. I'm going to phrase it that way, playfully popped her on her bottom, while they were in an aisle, and you can see this, and it wasn't like an aggressive kind of thing. It was like a love tap on her rear end. Yeah. And that speaks a lot. So how do you go from this point where you're in this environment and you've got wow, I sound like a school principal here, where you've got public displays of affection,
right?
In this environment, and then the next morning to find her unclothed, essentially, except for a top, and lying essentially adjacent to the roadway, partially hanging off of a curb from the way it sounds, and her body positioned on the grass. How do you get to that point? And I think that the authorities had to try to understand that. What else is at work here?
I thought it was interesting when you said positioned, because we've got a couple things going on with the crime scene here. But to back up for a minute, between the date night and the death, they go to the liquor store, and that's the last image we have of Kat West that we know of. They go home from there and continue drinking. They'd had a couple of drinks at dinner. They continue drinking at home. As the evening went on, investigators believed they were drinking a lot, which was not an uncommon thing for the couple. They drank a lot. They liked to drink. There is some discussion about Kat West's online activities. She had really ramped up her online presence. She was making money as a stay-at-home mom. She was making money online with a couple of different websites. One is called OnlyFans. You might have heard of OnlyFans. It has become fairly popular in the last couple of years for women to make money on the side or full-time. We've had a number of stories about teachers not making enough money teaching, so they get an OnlyFans page up and then get fired from the school. And you find out, well, they were making more in a month on OnlyFans than they got paid the entire year as a teacher. Yep. And that was where Kat West, she was in the beginning of that stage. And there is a discussion about how often Jeff West had a problem with it. Did Jeff West have no problem with his wife sharing these intimate photos of herself online and allow men to pay to see these videos and bigger ones? Or, was he for it or against it? Did he only have a problem with it when he was drinking? I mean, there are a lot of things in this, and the suggestion is that Jeff West was not happy about the direction his wife was going online, and that while they were both drinking, it led to an argument. And in this argument, Jeff West is accused of beating his wife to death, using the absinthe bottle to cause her death. That is what he was convicted of doing. Saying convicted of doing, because when her body was found, we have said partially nude and mostly nude, whatever you want to say. We know that at night, sometime during the night, Jeff took pictures of his wife in a bra, panties in a bra. But when she was found next to the road at 5 o'clock in the morning or whenever it was very early in the morning. She did not have any panties on. She did have her bra on. That was it. Her body had been moved, Joe. And I want to get to the crime scene very quickly here if we can, because the blood at the scene tells a story that I don't understand because I'm not you. Most of us have a little trouble when we actually get into the nuance of a crime scene. But in this particular case, the police say that her body had been moved and the bottle of absinthe was placed on top of the cell phone. Oh, let me back up. They said during the argument that Jeff West was so mad at his wife that he threw her phone out the door.
Yeah,
and that was what caused the damage to the phone.
One of the threads that runs through this is, obviously phone activity. And it has been stated that he had grown weary of her spending so much time on her phone and essentially ignoring him. And I can only imagine, he's thinking about, because I don't know. I don't know if there's a delineation or not, but if you are taking photos of the person that you're, married to, and you're pushing those out on the web and selling these, essentially, now you go up to another level where you're actually doing live videography, and because with OnlyFans, you're performing for people. And I got to tell you, when I first began to look into this case, and you had mentioned this earlier, one of the things I began to think about is Stalker, because it's, as you know, it's a very dark world out there in the digital space. And, how vulnerable are you as a person when, you strip away all of your clothing and you're displaying to the entire world, this such an intimate, I don't know, view of you in this environment. And people think that they own you at that point in time. And it's terrifying from the perspective of anybody could come into this environment, because look, it doesn't take a lot, Dave, for people to find you where you live. You might think that you have a certain amount of anonymity out there, but that's not the case. You know it, and I know it.
Joe, there was a show we did on Nancy Grace last week. It was about a stalker. It was dealing with Taylor Swift's stalker in New York that was arrested 4 or 5 times in a 5-day period. And on that show, there's an actress who has a stalker that has followed her around, and we're talking years here, including stalking her little daughter from the time that she was 5 years old till she became an adult. I mean, it's crazy. But one of the things she pointed out, I'm only going to say this because y'all need to know this. She said one way that people can find you is you might have everything on your social media, locked down tight with no addresses or anything else. It's not you. If I'm in a photo with Joe Scott Morgan, I'm locked up, I'm clamped down. You can't find me on my stuff, or, but I'm in a picture with Joe Scott Morgan. Then the stalker he sees that picture, sees me, and he looks at other people in the photo. Well, there's Joe, there's Joe's wife. And then they start looking up these other people in the photo to see if one of them can track back to the stalker's person. And that's how they find you. It's not through you, it's
all
through others that you associate with. Yes. And it is so intense, and the minutia that is there, I would have never thought about it, but now that we have people who really are, I don't want to say crazy, but they're not right. And so the first thought was, here is Cat West putting these pictures and photos out. Her husband oftentimes take the pictures and the videos. Does she have a stalker that believed that he was in a relationship with her? And when he shows up and sees Cat West with her husband having fun at their house, loses his cookies and kills her.
And that would be, and then you have a sexual element to it too, because anytime you come across you have, anybody can be nude and you see it and you think that automatically there is a sexual element. But when you consider this woman who is in this, let's face it, a very provocative position at that scene in front of her house, in view of the neighborhood, was somebody trying to send a message? it's the tiny details that will either lead to success or will spoil your investigation because you missed them. Those of us that are investigators and have been investigators, Lord knows I've missed my share of indicators at scenes over the years. And in this particular case, I think that there's a lot of granular detail, Dave, that could give an indication as to the dynamics of what happened that night and how Kat actually wound up in this, let's say it again, in this very, very provocative position in her front yard, essentially.
I find it fascinating. I find it fascinating, but Kat West is dead, and I think about her daughter growing up without her mother, and I don't want to. I feel like I'm saying fascinated, and it makes it somehow diminished, and that's not what I mean. But in this case,
No, of course not.
Prosecution and the defense, based on the evidence they have from inside the home, based on the video at the liquor store, other than the actual end, they say the scene tells the story, and the scene is set so much that we've talked about her being nearly nude on the front yard dead. But Joe, what can you tell from blood on the scene? What does it actually tell you? We know that they were out, they had a drink, they came home, continued drinking. He took 2 photos of her in the bra she was found in and some multicolored panties and stilettos and put those online. We know this. No, we don't know that he put them online. We know that he took the pictures. They were on the phone. But how she ended up in the front yard dead, her phone cracked, and a bottle of absinthe sitting on the top of the phone. Does the scene tell you what happened?
The blood actually gives you an indication of movement and activity, and that's what we always look for at a scene. Trying to understand the dynamics of an event and where an individual may have come, for instance, to rest. And in this particular case, there were 2 primary spots of blood that were found out by the roadway, and it's actually kind of a wow. I mean, I saw an image, and you don't really appreciate things, when you kind of talk about them in the abstract here. But all it takes, and that's why crime scene photography is so bold and is so useful in court, because you can appreciate the deposition, the volume of blood. And when you see how much blood is found actually in the street and adjacent to the grassy area where Kat West was found, it gives you an indication that that the body had been moved at some point in time, that it was initially resting in one spot and then moved to another.
Joe, when a body is found in dirt or grassy area and there's blood that has gone into the ground, do investigators dig up the ground?
Yes. Yep. Yeah. Good point. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And you will take soil samples. Just to and even if it can't necessarily give you a lot of definitive answers, you want to capture that bit of evidence to demonstrate certainly that there is this blood that has seeped through to this level. Now, I want people to understand this, because I think that folks think that we can go out to a scene and measure a volume of blood that we see, for instance, a stain on the ground, carpet, for instance, when you got a big area of blood. And even in like a grassy area, all we can say, we cannot measure volumes with a disbursement like that. There's no way. I mean, it's impossible to come up with an accurate volume of blood. All you can do is look at it and say, this is in fact blood, and this appears to be a tremendous amount of blood that may, and I've used this term before, may be incompatible with life. So, but again, to take that measurement and say, okay, well, yeah, right here, this person lost 4 pints of blood. You can't
Wow.
you can't definitively say that from a scientific. I don't know of anybody out there that can. It's not like let's just say it's a carpeted
Mhm.
surface. You can't cut that piece of carpet out and wring it out, because even if you did that to try to measure the amount that was there, there's still some that's left behind, super saturated into this environment. But what you can determine, or at least offer an opinion about, is that the body had in fact been moved in some way. So when you've got two primary spots, how did that happen? Are you trying to position the body? Are you trying to, um, to get uh, uh, get them out of the roadway, or did the person move themselves in this kind of perimortem state where they're out there maybe writhing around, they begin to bleed in one spot, they still have enough indwelling life left in them so that they can migrate to another position. And I think that's something that's interesting too, because you get an idea how long it took for her to die at that location. And listen, this is in a cold time of the year. When and even when you see the images from this crime scene, the cops are outdoors, they're wearing jackets. The grass is all brown, and here she is out here exposed to the elements. She's essentially nude, laying out there, and again laying out there for the entire world to see, Dave.
Joe, when you mentioned that there were two primary spots where the blood had gathered, I guess, or had, they could tell,
Pooled,
yeah,
yeah.
pooled. Thank you. Uh, that was just one of the tips of what they found at the crime scene. But the bottle of absinthe that was left next to the body was placed on top of the cell phone. And in my mind's eye, I was trying to think, is there any way possible that I misread this and that the bottle was laying near the phone?
No.
And because if it's near the phone, you can't say anybody put it there. It could have fallen. But to
Yeah.
say that the bottle was sitting on top of the cracked phone, police say that Jeff West, they were having an argument over her online photos and videos and got mad, and Jeff West threw the phone out the door, and that's what caused it to crack. And then later on, the defense, she fell and hit her head.
Yeah.
And I guess as she fell, the bottle of absinthe ended up sitting on top of the phone.
Yeah,
It makes no sense.
Hey, I got to tell you something, man. You know what that bottle reminds me of relative to that phone? It actually reminds me of an exclamation point,
Wow.
where you've
Wow.
got this cracked phone and you've got the base of the bottle sitting on top of the
Wow.
phone. It's almost like they're saying, "Okay, here you go. Your phone, and this bottle that we all believe, I believe, and certainly the coroner believed, was weaponized." And I know that term is used a lot, but let me just kind of break this down to you because it's fascinating. First off, Cat West had sustained what appears to have been a single blow to the head. And you think, well, how in the world could that actually kill somebody? Well, she had a laceration. And just so that we can review and go back to this and understand that lacerations are not cuts, lacerations arise from blunt force trauma. And, the lacerations, these kind of tearing, because that's what it is, because when you apply direct pressure to the skin with an object, the skin doesn't cut, it tears. And so you're going to have these kind of fibrous strings that hang on to either side. And that's called tissue bridging. It's one of the things that we look for at autopsy to show the kind of stringy connective tissue that's still holding both. If it was a blade that created an injury, you'd have these what they refer to as really neat margins where it's kind of cut, where you've got a milled blade. But in this particular case, this bottle was actually utilized to strike her with. And I would suggest that everybody, because interestingly enough, you remember those photos from that night? They took a picture, they being
Jeff and
Kat, of the bottle, and there's a vape sitting there too. And the bottle, it's actually lucid Lucid, absinthe. And I urge everybody, the bottle itself is green. There's a picture of it up there it looks like it's off of their countertop, their island, in their kitchen. This is very, very thick glass.
I was going to say, how is it possible that it could be used to deal a fatal blow to her head and still be easily a bottle without it shattering?
Easily, because these bottles, when you go down the neck, from the neck of the bottle and you get down to the base, these things many times are very robust. And the glass is very thick, and they can. It's not like an old Western movie where they've got breakaway bottles that are real thin, and you hear glass shatter. That doesn't happen.
What did the bottle show investigators, Joe? Was there anything on the bottle?
Yeah, and that's really kind of the cool aspect of this, because a tip of the cap to the local coroner, because she's trying to measure in her mind, how is it that this bottle was actually used to assault Cat West. And her conclusion was this, and you're going to have to visualize here just for a second. When they lifted latent prints off of this bottle, they found both Cat West prints and Jeff West prints on the bottle. And you would get the fingerprints itself, but you could probably come up with a palm print, because glass is what we refer to as a non-porous surface. So when you leave behind a latent print, that means unseen, those fatty lipids on the surface of your skin leave this image. It's a negative image of your friction ridges on your hand on the surface of the bottle. And as the coroner is trying to figure out the dynamics of this, one thing that she and the crime scene people came up with, and the detectives, was that just everybody at home right now, imagine that you've got a liquor bottle or a wine bottle in front of you. Rotate your hand so that your thumb is in the downward position, and you grab the neck of the bottle. All right. The bottle itself at that point can become a bludgeon. And so when you rotate your hand back up, the barrel of the bottle and the bottom of the bottle becomes this object that you can beat somebody with. And isn't it interesting that when they actually raise the prints, Dave, on the neck of this bottle, you can clearly see that Jeff West's hand is there in that position. Now, I don't know about you, but when I pour something from a bottle, I don't take it and invert my hand and then twist it around, because you can't control the volume of liquid that's coming out of the bottle. So that leads you to this conclusion: why in the world would he hold that bottle that way? Well, I guess you could say, he took it out of the store, he grabbed it that way. It's an unusual way of holding it, and defense can argue that. But I think that the reason that he was convicted in this particular case, and Jeff West was in fact convicted in this case, was this demonstration of how this bottle was used, how his hand was positioned, and certainly the strike to Cat West's head that ended her life there on the street. I'm Joseph Scott Morgan, and this is Body Bags.
This is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.